Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Just wanted to meet you down here in the Seed Lab this morning and talk a little bit about a project that we're working on and some of the techniques that I use for seed stratification. What I have here is a list of the species that we're using for this project, and this is a habitat restoration for milkweed butterfly, monarch butterflies. And so we have in Southwest Ohio, we have about 24 plant species that are critical for monarch habitat. Some of them are for the species are Asclepias, that are for larval food sources, and then the other 20 species are pollen food sources for the adult butterflies. And so I created a table that sort of guides the seed activities associated with this project. So what I was going to do, we're getting ready to stratify seed based on our sowing date, and I wanted to walk through the process that I use for seed stratification. So seed, when you buy it, native plant seed like this for an herbaceous species, generally the storage conditions for seed are different than the sowing conditions for seed, and so we have to take that into consideration. For long-term seed storage, we like to have moisture content of the seed at about 5 to 10% moisture content. Now for stratification and germination needs, we like to have moisture content at about 30 to 35%. So through some trial and error and research with some of the nurseries that I've worked with over the years, we've determined that a 48-hour soak of seed is beneficial to get that moisture content up to 35%. So I have a couple of different jars here that I started the process of soaking. And then what I'll do over that 48-hour period, and the goal is to get that moisture content up. If the water becomes dirty like this through the leaching of potential germination inhibitors or just surface debris on the seed, I'll rinse this out and start with a fresh batch of water. So I'll show you both of those processes here. So we have in front of me, this is Asclepias incarnata, which is rose milkweed, and this is a half of an ounce of seed. And so one of the things that I'll want to do, a half of an ounce of seed based on my table tells me that I should have equivalent of about 2,400 seed. And for this project, we want about 1,000 seed. Okay, and even 1,000 is more than we need for the project. We're looking for about 250 plants, and so that'll end up being 3 or 4 seeds per cell for germination. And assuming our germination listed here is 97%, that's a pretty high seed count even for this project. So we have potential for about 4,800 seed here, and I'm gonna lower this seed count by simply just going in and weighing this and getting a more accurate distribution of seed for this individual project. And so this is a 1/4 ounce of rose milkweed seed that I have here now, and that should be equivalent based on the seed table here. 1/4 ounce would be equivalent to about 1,200 seed, and that'll be plenty for the project. So what I'll do is at this point I just add water, and again the goal is to get the moisture content up of the seed up to about 35%, and that'll allow me to do one of two things: either sow the seed directly if that's what I need to do, or move this seed into a stratification practice, and we can discuss that. So what I make sure to do, because I have multiple seed lots here, I use an acronym two letter for the genus AS, and two letter for the species IN for incarnata. So AS Asclepius incarnata, and I'll mark that. And then on my table here, I'll put today's date, which is February 18th, under a 48-hour soak. So I have pretty much all my information on my seed card. I'll go back and say I used a 1/4 ounce on 2/18/2022. And I'll say that that's used, and then what I can do is put this card back in. I have a record of what the seed's been used for, and then I'll put this seed, dry stored seed, back into my cold storage refrigerator, which is directly under the table here, and I accumulate that all into a seed Ziploc baggie. Okay, so at that point I've started the 48-hour soak on this Asclepius incarnata. Water is very clean, but I have some here that are, essentially need the water to be changed out. And so this is Alergeron rigidum, which is the stiff goldenrod, sometimes known as Solidago rigidum, but it's been given a new genus name now. Oleogeneron. And so what I use for that is the genus outside of the normal genus Solidago. I will use a coffee filter to filtrate off this dirty water, and of course I'll get a little bit of seed in there as a result, and I don't concern myself too much about a little bit of water residue, because I may change this 2 or 3 times during the process. And any of that leftover seed, so we have a saying here in the lab, no seed left behind, so we want to make sure to acquire and capture all of the seed back into its proper place, which in this case is back into this tiny little mason jar. So now I'm in the first 24-hour cycle of the soaking process of these species that need a 60-day cold stratification. And I like to get the moisture content, as I mentioned, up to 35%. That's where the seed is going to benefit the most metabolically from during the cold stratification process. And that's just something that we've learned as growers over time, doing research and conducting trials and reading the available literature out there, is getting that moisture content up to 35 for either sowing or strat. Now, easy to germinate species you wouldn't probably do this with at all. Tomatoes, most of your vegetable crops, but certainly some of our native plant species, or some seeds that are just inherently difficult to handle. A really small seed like maybe lobelia can be, so small it's hard to do some of these pre-seed treatments, and so possibly just sowing them out. Now, this is an example of a seed that I'm also soaking, and eventually this week this seed will be sown. And again, because it was in long-term storage, I like to get the seed up pre-imbibed before I go into sowing, and I'm just going to show you that process, or again, stratification. So I'm going to rinse this out completely this time. And in the interest of no seed left behind, the glass becomes empty. And what I'll do at this point is tap this out. This is Echinacea purpurea. And again, I'm just, some growers won't do this 24-hour soak or 48-hour soak, but I want to, pre-imbibe the seed before I go into sowing and or stratification to get that moisture content up somewhat artificially here. And then what I will do in this case of Echinacea purpurea, depending on if I'm going to sow it or stratify it right away, I like to surface dry the seed coat. So for stratification, we're looking at internal moisture content, not external seed coat moisture levels. And so I can dry this on a paper towel for an hour or two, not affect the internal moisture content in the embryo and endosperm of that seed. And then I'll be either able to handle this seed very easily for sowing, or when I put it in stratification, my stratification bag, it'll be dry, it'll be surface dry, so I don't have to worry about molds and things of that sort. So that's kind of a process that I go through. Right now, surface drying this, getting ready for sowing or stratification.